Today, I'm going to give you the writing journey of what might be my next book. Hey there, welcome back to the channel. If you're new, my name is Meghan Rogers. I'm a writer and an author, and on this channel, we talk about all things books, writing, and life. And today, I wanted to give you a little bit of some background on the journey of writing the book that may very well end up being my next book. I shared a lot about this book in the previous video, which I will link above, that will kind of tell you a little bit more about what the book itself is about, why it matters to me, that kind of stuff. So if you're more interested in that, you can find that information. I'll link it both above in the video and below in the description box. But for now, I wanted to share a little bit more with you about the writing journey of this book. So just to quickly summarize, in case you have not seen the previous video, this book is called Who's Lying at Emory High? It is a young adult contemporary mystery. First, in case you haven't seen the previous video, I do just want to give you a brief summary of what this book is about. So my main character, Chloe, is on her school's newspaper. She's an investigative journalist, and she wants to investigate her classmate who has been expelled. He's been expelled for a crime he claims he did not commit, a theft and drugs that were in his locker that he says he does not use. And he says those things weren't his and he'd had nothing to do with this. Now, Dean very much fits the part of the type of a student you would expect to do something like this. So there is a lot of speculation. Most people do not believe he is telling the truth. But Chloe gets into things and it looks like there actually might be some truth to what he's saying and something bigger at play. So the book itself is written from her perspective, but what you're actually getting is her investigation. So she shares her investigation online because the school censors her. They will not publish the article that she wanted to write about the incident. So she shares it online, and you get to follow what you are reading in the book is actually her investigation. So it's as if you were reading it online as Chloe is sharing it, which made it so much fun to write. But I want to tell you about the writing journey of this book. So the inspiration, the timeline for it, how it all came together, that kind of stuff. First, I was inspired by American Vandal, which is a Netflix series with a very similar premise, but it's much more, it's called a mockumentary. So the premise of that show is that a student is expelled for vandalism, which he says he did not partake in. So somebody who was on the school's morning show and in their journalism department starts to investigate that incident to see if this kid really did commit this crime or not. And what you are watching on Netflix is the actual documentary that the student is making. And I just loved the premise of that. I thought it was so cool. Like, first it was suggested to me by a friend. It seemed really ridiculous. I was like, I don't know about this, but she was very adamant. She's like, you need to watch this show. You will love it. And I did for so many reasons. I mean, watching it, one, I felt like I really connected, or like I knew a lot of the characters. Both having gone through high school, but then also having worked there, I felt like I knew these kids, I knew these teachers. I just knew this environment really well. And the fact that it was like set in California and I grew up in Pennsylvania, like there was just so many similarities that I feel like really spoke to the universal nature of a high school. I think we all know people and like characters and teachers and students like that you might encounter in that show. So that was really interesting to me, but also just the way the show was put together. I felt like despite the borderline absurdity of what was being investigated, I needed to know. Like, I needed to know what happened. I needed to know who did this. And I wanted to explore that from a creative standpoint. Like, how can you kind of make somebody want to really follow this thread and pace something so well that you're putting a mystery together and there's, you know, some red herrings, but also like some real clues and needing to follow this through and needing to see who really did commit this crime ultimately. So that was like the inspiration behind it. And I first watched American Vandal in fall of 2017. And again, like I watched it in one night. It's not a super long show. Like, it's easy to do in one day, but still I started it late and I was I was planning on going to bed. Like I was not going to stay up to watch the show, but I totally stayed up to watch the show because I needed to know. And that to me was so much of like the fun and the joy of the show. And that's what I was trying to capture to a degree in the book. My topic is much more serious than what they're exploring in the show. And that's really was pulling from my own experience as a substitute teacher in high school and having spent so much time just in that environment and what I've seen and what I witnessed. I was able to pull all of that together in this book, which was so much fun. So once I was inspired, I spent, and this is typical for me, I spent a good I'm gonna say 4 or 5 months just kind of brainstorming and gathering ideas. For me, it tends to start in an email thread, because I'm always near something that has my email on it. So I will email notes to myself. Just different things I have a thread in my email that's for this book and I just keep emailing ideas, thoughts I have. I call it letting the idea cook. So it just kind of cooked for a few months. And at some point in there, I don't remember exactly when, but at some point in there, I did start brainstorming more concretely. I rewatched American Vandal with a more analytical eye, really looking at what my assessment was of how I was able to be pulled through this story. And I took notes on each episode and then I developed my own characters. So in that time, I was both letting the idea cook, but then also doing some more structured brainstorming. Then in February of 2018, I finally started writing. And I remember it very clearly because it was the day after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, the first Super Bowl. And I had to be up early anyway because people were coming to do the bathrooms. I was very tired, but it was I was up. I might as well do this. The book starts out with the article that the school would not publish for Chloe. So I wrote that article that day. And this was a story that just came together so quickly. I don't think I've ever written a book this quickly. And I mean from start to finish, not just the drafting, but then doing all of the revisions and all getting feedback, all of that kind of stuff. I wrote this book in about 9 months. I think I started in February and I finished it, I think around September, it was either the end of August or the beginning of September. But it was just something, I felt like it flew out of my fingertips. I was just writing on fire, and the way the story came together, it just came together so naturally, and the characters just felt so fun and so sharp, but also writing from the perspective of Chloe in the sense that you're reading what she is publishing, which was just so cool and so fun for me. We also got some comments in there, which I was not expecting the comment section to be so fun, but thanks to some feedback from my early readers, it really turned into a fun and interesting aspect of the book that I really loved and enjoyed. So I finished the whole book in it was a year from conception to completion, which again is pretty fast for me. It usually takes me about a year and a half minimum. Sometimes longer, some books need more time, but the shortest I think I've ever written a book is a year and a half. It takes me about 6 months to develop the idea and then at least a year to fully execute it and do all the revisions and that kind of stuff. But this one just came so quickly. And then from there, I did send it to my agent. She loved it. We submitted it once and it didn't really sell, so we just pulled it back. And I shelved it for a while, I was torn between, of course it was disappointing, but also I do believe in the book, so I want it to be out there and with people who believe in it and in a way that it can be received well, or at least just received, because it's also a book I think will probably piss some people off, but that's fine. But I do want it to be something that it gets some attention because I do think it's important. There's several messages in it, which I talked about in the last video if you want to learn more about that. But there are several messages in it that I do think are just really important to be shared. So as much as I was disappointed, I didn't want it to be in a bad situation. So I shelved it, worked on some other stuff. And then during the pandemic, I was just kind of I just want to write what I want to write. I wasn't really jiving with the project I was working on then. I was I just want to revisit that book. I want to see what it is. I want to see what's there. Let me just dive into it. So I did. And man, I remember reading that book with as much excitement as I wrote it, because it was so cool to finish that draft and feel man, this is still a really good book. I feel there's still something here. I even going back and having taken so much time away from it, I wasn't seeing a ton of flaws and errors, but I felt it was still a really good book. However, I did see how it could be so much better. There were notes I had gotten from some early readers the first time through that it didn't quite make sense to me at the time, that made more sense to me now. Or then, I guess I should say, because it was 2020. So I went back into the book and I was like, I pulled it apart, and because it's a mystery, like, it's an investigation, she is trying to get to the bottom of this case. This was actually the hardest part of it. Writing it the first time through was not a struggle, but taking it apart and then trying to fit it back together, that was a little rough. Like, that took 2 years because it was just so hard to kind of keep, like, it was really the middle that was the issue. The beginning was pretty good, and the end, especially the last third, was really strong. So it was just kind of making the middle more interesting. I think getting to the heart of the book a little bit quicker. So trying to do that, it also then meant I had to like redistribute the clues, redistribute the mystery, redistribute how, like, the pacing of the whole book in a way that keeps you going the way I originally intended you to, but is still really interesting and tight as a book and tight as a story, which again, like, that was actually the real struggle. It took me 2 years to do it, as I believe I've already said. And by the time I finished, I was feeling really good about it. And that, I think, is the most important thing. That's always my goal, is at the end of the day, I have to feel good about what I'm putting out there. I can't control what other people think, but if I'm putting a book out there that I would be a fan of if I hadn't written it, I feel like I've done all I can do. And that's how I was feeling about this book. So I sent it off to my agent. She was really swamped at the time, and it was a while before she thought she would get to it. That ended up being a very long time, to the point that it was clear to me that I don't think she really had the time for it, which she ultimately agreed with, and we ended up parting ways at that point. So in the meantime, I've kind of been off and on querying this book. I haven't been doing it seriously. I've had other stuff going on, like building another business, finding a second passion that I love as much as writing, which is so cool, that I've been wanting to give more time and attention to. Also moved a couple times. Those details are in some previous videos if you want to check those out. I think it's like the first 2 videos on the channel. I kind of give some life update stuff. But overall, I have not been putting publishing and like getting published again too high on my priority list, but things have settled for me a little bit more now, and I'm ready to recommit to it. So I've just started like the beginnings of doing like querying seriously for this book. So we will see what happens with it. At this point, I do still love it. I talked about that in the last video. I do love a lot of what this book represents, a lot of what it could be, but ultimately, I also wouldn't be too disappointed if this isn't my next book. Because I feel like in a lot of ways, like especially having been gone from publishing for so long, the book I'm writing now currently is much more aligned with where I'm at right now. I do have more enthusiasm for that book. Again, not that I don't have enthusiasm for Who's Lying at Emory High and Chloe's story, but I'm just like, that was 2018 that I started writing that book. And I am in such a different place now that it just doesn't feel completely aligned with where I am. And I do still want it to be read. So it's like, if I can't get somebody who, like an agent and then a publisher, who can see this book for what it can be and can see the importance of it and the value of it, then I would rather it not be my next book. I would rather it come out later when I can get that kind of attention for it. So I'm really open for this book to be whatever it wants to be, for it to come out whenever it wants to come out. I do think there's still a lot of value in it, and I am hopeful to share it at some point in time, and I hope you will be interested in reading it when it comes out. So that's the writing journey so far for Who's Lying at Emory High. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.